Hey guys, today we're going to talk about probably something that is the most anticipated subject because it's fairly modern. History is World War II. So let's jump right into it. It's going to be with chapter 31, section 2 and 3, mostly 3. But so what led up to the start of World War II? Lots of stuff. Let's start with this. First of all, in chapter 31, section 2, in Russia, they had this revolution called the Bolshevik Revolution, the Russian Revolution, that when Russia became the Soviet Union and became a communist country under Vladimir Lenin. So they kind of had their big power thing. We'll get back to that in a second. We talked about how Germany was especially hit hard because of their reparations, things they had to pay back, and kind of sunk them into a Great Depression. The whole world went into this Great Depression, and people really took advantage of that and started these totalitarian, it's a hard word for me to say, regimes, okay? So totalitarianism, the idea that government should have total control over the lives of people, okay? So what we have is we have these totalitarian regimes kind of building, and they want to gain power. In particular, Nazi Germany. Okay, Hitler grasps power in Germany, and the Nazi Party wins a lot of power in their Congress, and he becomes kind of second in charge. And on one night, Kristallnacht, he takes total power of Germany, and they start expanding and building up their military again. So kind of the first step was Poland, here in the middle. They get hit on the west from Germany and the east on the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union was actually partners with Germany for just a minute. They invaded Poland, split Poland, and then they became enemies. So that kind of happens. They try to appease Hitler. One guy that gets a pretty bad rap, and a deserved bad rap, is a guy named Neville Chamberlain from Great Britain. He says, "Hey, Hitler, don't do that again." Actually, he said that when he went into Austria first, and then he said, "Don't do that again, or we're going to have to, go to war." And then he invades Poland, and so Great Britain and France jump in, and they ally with the Soviet Union. So the Allied forces, we'll skip to that one, are the United States eventually, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. But the big three are going to be U.S., Great Britain, and Russia, or the Soviet Union. Lots of other players involved. The Axis powers, the three main players, are going to be Germany, Italy, and Japan. Italy gets in because they have a guy named Mussolini, and they have this fascist regime, and they start attacking places in northern Africa, in particular Ethiopia, and they move into Egypt, and so they have some problems there. Japan, they attack a place in China called Manchuria, and they go after Manchuria, so they invade China and start trying to expand that way. If you think about Japan, it's an island. They want more land, so they jump across that sea and try to attack. So why did we enter the war? December 7th, 1941, a day that will live in infamy. The Japanese suddenly and deliberately attack Pearl Harbor. As FDR, president, stated, they did that because, as we said, they attacked China, okay? And we said, hey, don't do that. And we put an embargo on them. So there were some tensions, okay? There was not full-blown war or anything. And instead of just kind of wait around for something to happen, they attacked us. And that ended up, in the long run, being a bad idea for them. So we jump in against Japan because Germany is allies with Japan. They declare war on us. We declare war on everybody. And now we're in Europe and in the Pacific, in Asia. Okay. We're going to look at these leaders. Okay. Mussolini, he's the fascist. And fascists is a political system that stresses national strength, military might, and the belief that the state is more important than the individual. He's the fascist leader of Italy. Bad dude. Hitler, I think we know who Hitler is. He is the Nazi dictator of Germany. And Stalin is the dictator, and he's the leader of the Soviet Union. Okay, he takes over the Soviet Union, and it talks about, I like that the book mentions this. The Soviet government seized land from people so they could have total control, and even here, during some of these revolts, 5 million people starved to death just in the Ukraine. When you kind of rank bad guys, Stalin, even though he was our ally at first, or during World War II, he was a bad dude. He was responsible, some people will say, for about 40 million deaths. Lots of those his own people. If you went against the government, Siberia, you were gone. Okay, so FDR, he was the 4-term president. You can only serve 2 terms now. He was the last one that was a 4-term president. He introduced lots of things to get us out of the Great Depression. The New Deal was a thing. That's where things like Social Security started. They built lots of roads, the Conservation Corps. They did lots of these big public works to get people back to work. And then he led us through World War II until he died. Harry Truman took over after him. And Winston Churchill was the Prime Minister of Great Britain. He's also ended up being a really great leader. He's got a really cool story. He was kind of a failed politician. He had run for lots of things. He had some success, but he had more failures. But when he eventually took over, he was the leader that Great Britain needed during World War II. So Germany attacks Poland. They decide to then go west, and they go and march, and they take Paris. They are seizing lots of power, and the Allies start fighting back. The United States starts fighting back. We have wars in North Africa against the Desert Fox, was the general in charge down there for Germany, and we eventually went down there. We attack mainland France in a battle called D-Day. That's kind of, we were starting to gain some traction, and the Allies decided to attack the beaches at Normandy. That's D-Day, June 6th. The Battle of Britain was a big one. That's when the Germans were attacking London and attacking Great Britain with their blitzkrieg tactics. Blitzkrieg is they would go in with all their airplanes. They would come in and hit you and bomb you and shoot at you, and then immediately after they'd send their tanks and everybody in. It was a really effective strategy for them. So basically, here's where we're at. The Germans have 2 fronts. They go to the Soviet Union, and they have some success, actually, but eventually they just peter out. One thing you need to learn from history is do not attack the Soviet Union in the winter. They eventually just kind of peter out, and the Soviets are able to fight them back. Even though they took some places like St. Petersburg and had some successes there, they're eventually pushed back. The Red Army, that's the Soviets, pushes back. In the West, they take Paris. They're in control of Western Europe. The United States and others attack the beaches at Normandy, and they start moving this way. Lots of things are happening while this is happening, and eventually we surround Berlin, and that's how the war ends in Europe. Okay. One interesting thing, I didn't mention this earlier, is that as the Germans were going west into France and Belgium, the French built this line called the Maginot Line. They were like, they're going to come through here, and they are not getting through the Maginot Line. And the Germans found out about it, and they went around it. And they marched into France basically with little to no opposition. So the war ends in Europe because they surround that. I'm going to jump to the Holocaust question here. We've mostly heard of the Holocaust, but one way that Hitler was able to gain power was through anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish ideas and actions. They first made it encouraged people to not go to Jewish businesses. Then they closed Jewish businesses. Then they moved all Jewish people into ghettos, okay, into certain neighborhoods. They made Jewish people go to certain neighborhoods, identify themselves as Jews. And then the thing called the final solution was to take them to concentration camps and eventually we found out to kill them. So that's a Holocaust is a mass killing. It's a mass genocide, is like a targeted killing of one people. So there have been lots of Holocausts throughout the world history, but the Holocaust is this one. About 6 million Jews killed in concentration camps. You've heard stories of the gas chambers and all those things. The rest of the world kind of found out about this as the Soviets march in, as the United States and Great Britain march in. We find these camps. And if you go to the Holocaust Museum, especially in 8th grade in Washington, D.C., you can see them liberating these camps and the absolute horrors that they find there. So that's kind of when the rest of the world found out about all that. Unfortunately, there are still people that deny that the Holocaust happened today. There's really good evidence that it happened. And we need to learn from that kind of lack of tolerance. Okay, the battles, I've explained a few. You could have Pearl Harbor, you could have D-Day, the Battle of Midway, the Battle of Britain. You could talk about lots of those battles. Yeah, you can find some of those in your book. War ended in Europe. We eventually surrounded Hitler. Hitler dies by killing himself. They think he took a cyanide pill, and he also killed his girlfriend, Eva Braun, with him. The war in the Pacific. So victory over Europe, in Europe, happens. And so we win, right? Wrong. We're still fighting in Asia. The Japanese do not want to surrender. In fact, it's not really in their DNA to surrender. If you've heard of the kamikaze fighters, rather than surrender, Japanese pilots, if they knew they were going down, would go right into your ship. It was going back to like Shogun days and going back to samurai days. It was not very honorable to surrender. So they were a tough people to fight. The fighting is awful in the Pacific. There's these islands like Iwo Jima is another battle that happened. The famous one where we got to the top and we raised the flag. That was kind of a stage thing. That did happen. A flag went up, but they staged that later. They took some soldiers and put that on the cover of Life magazine. But really awful fighting. It's really hard. These islands are little tiny islands and they go up. And so if you have the high ground, you've got it's definitely easier to defend. So it's really tough to win those battles. Well, the fighting is going awful. President Roosevelt has died. President Truman is now in charge, and he's got a decision. We've been working through this thing called Project Manhattan on building an atom bomb, okay, a nuclear bomb. They split an atom, and it creates big energy, and it is ready to use. And so he has a decision. So you need to think to yourself, if you were the president, do you decide, A, to end the war quickly, saving potentially millions of lives, civilian lives, and your own people's lives, other people's lives, and end the war by dropping a bomb? Or do you let the war go on and do you let it stretch out? Japan is not looking like it's going to surrender. He chooses option A, drops a bomb on Hiroshima, kills about, I think, 90,000 pretty immediately. And those are civilians and everything, wipes out a whole city. The emperor says, nope, we're not surrendering. So we drop another bomb on Nagasaki. Kills about 70,000 people, I think are the numbers. And eventually the emperor surrenders and the war ends in the Pacific. Really tough. Still the only times that a nuclear bomb has been used in aggression are those two instances in World War II, and a really tough conundrum to be in. So there ends World War II. Thousands of deaths, about 400,000 American lives lost during World War II. And it kind of shapes the rest of the century, the 20th century, the 1900s. World War II is the biggest thing to happen. They call that generation the greatest generation. They went off to war. They came home. They rebuilt America. They made America the strong nation that it is today. So interesting. There's still some of those people that are around. I know my grandpa was around till about 10 years ago, and he was part of that generation. So hope you liked learning about that. That was a lot in 15 minutes. We could go on and on and on. Tomorrow we'll jump into what happened after World War II.